Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I'm going to talk about some thoughts and theories that I have about the TV show Legion, in particular the character David, and him going forward into season 3. Do note that this will involve me going into spoilers, so obviously if you have not seen season 1 or season 2, do not watch this. A lot of this is going to be stuff, kind of a culmination of a lot of stuff I brought up when I was reviewing season 2, so do keep that in mind. So obviously, once again, I don't know comic books, so it's an interesting thing for me to see David kind of turning into the main antagonist of the show. It's such an interesting thing because you're like, oh man, he's the hero. Farouk's in his head making him feel like he was crazy most of his life, and it's something I talked about in season 2 that I think it's such a fantastic thing that when I rewatched season 1, I picked up and I was like, oh, that's so interesting, because for such a long time, Melanie and Sydney, as well as everyone else, was telling him oh, you're not crazy. Your abilities make it seem like you're crazy, but you're not crazy. But he had brought it up. It's like, you guys are so sure, but how are you guys, are you 100% sure that I'm not just crazy? That maybe I do have these powers and stuff like that, sure, but maybe there is a level of I am a bit crazy too. And I feel like they flushed that out and played with that a lot more, especially in season 2, the whole aspect of there being a lot more to David. Because it's so interesting to me, because it's sad, because I feel like David kind of got the short end of the straw, just because it's like he's painted as the main antagonist because, well, he is the main antagonist in the future that Future Sid is from. But you could also make the argument that's all because Farouk was in his head for so long, and because of that, it severely messed him up. But it's just, the fact is that they feel like there's a dark side to David that he just hides so well, that he puts on, when they're referring to it wears a human face, they weren't referring to Farouk, that they were technically referring to David, because it was actually him. He's the monster wearing the human face. Because to me, I feel like, and I said this when I was talking about the season 2 finale, that the fact of the matter is, I feel like it's so interesting that they want to paint him as a villain, but it's like, how do you know that your actions aren't what made him into the monster that he is? I mean, to be fair, there's a different future where he is the monster, but it's like we don't know the exact circumstances that led to that, because obviously this timeline is very different, because for one, well, Farouk is still alive, so a lot of stuff ended up playing out a little bit differently. It also makes you wonder with the whole, God, I can't think of the word I'm thinking of, is bothering me so much. I guess I would just use the word continuity, but I can't think of what I'm thinking of. But the continuity of time travel, does that mean that Future Sid had another Future Sid tell her, so it's like that whole cycle thing, or what? I mean, to be fair, either way it goes, this is a different timeline and stuff, because things are different. For example, as we can tell, Sid isn't missing an arm present day, but to be fair, who knows? Maybe things will still kind of go down that route, because David is alive, he's off with Lenny, so he feels like everyone he knew and cared about has turned their back on him. Because it's also interesting too when you add in the aspects of the different futures you saw for David. And I guess maybe that's kind of implications of that too, because it's things don't work out for him in a lot of other futures, like the future where he was homeless, he ended up dying in that one. The whole future with him and Amy, didn't work out for him in that one either. But then there's the whole situation of the future where he was rich and then Farouk was still inside of him. In that future, it didn't reflect the future that Sid came from. So I guess that shows you on some level Farouk is the lesser of the two evils, because even while he's in control of David's body, still a part of David, that he isn't the monster that David is all on his own, which is kind of sad and messed up, But it also shows you that there is a possibility of oh, there's a whole situation with him having a normal life, having kids, being married and happy. I mean, obviously it's a whole bunch of extenuating circumstances of things have to play out very differently, but where we are in the timeline is too far down that route for anything to be done, Which at the same time, it's this isn't the best option, but this is the only option they have, because this is the particular timeline that they live in. And that's what I'm curious about going forward with Legion in season 3. Will they just make him pure outright the main antagonist? Will he kind of go down that darker route because he feels like everyone's turned on, even the woman he loves? Because, in her eyes, it's kind of yeah, I don't really know you. You're just wearing all these different masks, being the person you think people want you to be, who you should be, and how you should act, because maybe in some twisted way you don't know how to really be a person, because it's not your fault you had Farouk in your head for 30 some years. And at the same time I'm but that is so messed up, because even Farouk's oh, they put me as a villain, but here I am, I'm actually the hero of the story, which is so messed up. It's also considering the fact is who his dad is too. I mean, in particular, David, you know, we all know it's Professor X. So it does make you wonder, like, once again, don't know him in the comic books. So I don't know if he always goes down this route. I think, you know, it's also the struggle of like having his abilities, what they are, like, because I think because of his mind being the way it is, it's kind of fractured, because we see it even more in season 2, him having conversations with himself, like, all those different Davids being like, oh yeah, they want us to be bad guy, why don't we just be the bad guy then, since they want to look at us like that. It's like, forget about Sydney and stuff like that, but he's like, no, I can't. Like I said, there was all these 3 different Davids that manifested themselves in his head, kind of playing up the aspect of like, legitimately he is a little crazy. I mean, the ultimate question being like, would he be like that if it wasn't for Farouk? Maybe that timeline where he has everything as a timeline where his powers were taken away, or maybe he never had Farouk and he just lived a happy life with his abilities never really being found out. Maybe his abilities never developed, because they kind of develop at different points in time, like in those different possible futures. Because one is because he kind of medicated himself. That was the one where he was kind of like living with Amy. Like I said, this just ultimately goes back to the point I brought up before, like, is he the true antagonist, or is he just the monster that they created? Because they put so much on him to be like, oh, they needed him to be this. It's like, oh, we need you to be the hero, you're the most powerful mutant out there. They kind of put all these labels and titles to him. They kind of put him in the hero role, and he just kind of tried to fill it out and be the best that he thought he could be. Or, you know, is he secretly the hero? You know, I mean, that all depends on what direction they go down, you know, in season 3. Like, will they make him try to backpedal a lot of that? Will he kind of, you know, maybe there's going to be a point where he's too far gone. Like, is he too far gone at this point in time, or is there still hope for him? Many different questions on that front. Like I said, these are just some of my thoughts and theories about the whole situation. Let me know some of your thoughts in the comments down below. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this video. Till the next time, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good